There is a nation in the Bible that was banned from the presence of God, not for 1 generation, not for 2, for 10 generations. The law was specific, the judgment was deliberate, and the reason, when you trace it back to its origin, is darker than most people realize. Deuteronomy 23 records the sentence plainly: "No Moabite shall enter the assembly of the Lord, even to the 10th generation, ever." That is not a warning, that is a verdict. But here is the question history demands we ask. What did this nation do, and what did they become to deserve a judgment written into divine law before they ever raised a sword? The answer begins long before their armies marched. It begins with a cave, a fire, and a choice that never should have been made.
To understand Moab, you must go back to the most catastrophic night in the story of Lot. Lot had survived Sodom. He had watched fire consume an entire civilization. He had lost his wife, and he fled with his 2 daughters into the mountains with nothing but their lives. That should have been the beginning of redemption. Instead, Genesis 19 records something deeply disturbing. His daughters, convinced the world had ended and no men remained, devised a plan. They made their father drink wine, and on 2 consecutive nights they conceived children by him. The firstborn daughter named her son Moab, meaning "from my father." She did not hide what happened, she embedded it in the name. This was not an accident. This was the origin of a people whose entire identity was built on a fractured foundation, born from deception, conceived in moral collapse, carrying a secret wound from the very first breath. This is where the story of Moab truly begins. Despite their origin, the Moabites became a real and powerful nation. They settled east of the Dead Sea, in the elevated tablelands stretching along the Jordan Rift Valley. Their territory was fertile, their cities were established, their culture was organized with a royal line, military structure, and a national god, Chemosh. They were not primitive, they were not insignificant. Archaeological evidence confirms their civilization. The Mesha stele, a black basalt stone carved in the 9th century BC, was inscribed by a Moabite king boasting of his military victories. They had a voice in history. They had power in their region. The Moabites were neighbors to Israel, close enough to trade, close enough to intermarry, close enough to influence. And that proximity became the weapon. The defining sin of Moab was not a single battle. It was a strategy of seduction. When Israel passed through the wilderness, Moab's king, Balak, could not defeat them militarily. He knew it. So he hired a prophet named Balaam to curse them instead. God refused. 3 times Balaam opened his mouth to curse Israel, and 3 times blessing came out instead. But Balaam gave Balak a different strategy before he left. Numbers 31 reveals it. Send the women. Let them pull Israel into worship of Chemosh and Baal of Peor. Let them corrupt from within what cannot be conquered from without. It worked. 24,000 Israelites died in the plague that followed. This is where the story turns. Moab had discovered that nations can be destroyed not only with armies, but with influence, not with weapons, but with worship. This decision changed everything. Moab's aggression against Israel was not occasional, it was generational. During the period of the Judges, Moab's king Eglon dominated Israel for 18 years, a humiliation recorded in Judges 3. Israel cried out, and God raised up a left-handed man named Ehud to deliver a message to the king. Ehud drove a blade so deep into Eglon's stomach that the handle disappeared into the flesh. It was not merely a military account, it was a picture of how deeply Moab's oppression had reached into God's people. And still, Moab persisted. Their cultural pull never stopped. their gods remained. Their women remained on the borders of Israel's conscience. And when Israel's kings grew comfortable and spiritually careless, Moab was always nearby, offering an alternative. God was watching. The prophets spoke against Moab with a precision that left no room for misinterpretation. Isaiah 15 and 16 describe Moab's coming ruin in detail, their cities silenced, their people wailing, their pride brought low. Isaiah wrote that Moab's arrogance was well known, their pride, their insolence, their boasting. Jeremiah 48 is even more severe. God speaks through the prophet with language almost surgical in its force. Because Moab trusted in its works and its treasures, it would be taken. Because it had been at ease from its youth, never exiled, never emptied, its taste had remained in it, and its scent had not changed. That phrase is devastating. Moab had never suffered enough to change. Comfort had calcified their arrogance. Prosperity had become a prison they could not see. Zephaniah adds that Moab would become like Sodom, the very city their ancestor Lot had fled. The circle was closing. The judgment was inevitable. Moab declined precisely as the prophets described. Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon swept through the region in the 6th century BC. Moab as a nation was effectively erased. Their cities fell silent, their royal line dissolved. Their people were absorbed into surrounding empires until the name Moab became a geographic memory rather than a living identity. Jewish historian Josephus records that Nebuchadnezzar conquered Moab in the same campaigns that brought down Judah. They did not survive it. By the time of the New Testament, Moab no longer existed as a people. They had vanished, not suddenly, but inevitably, exactly as God had declared through his prophets centuries before. History remembers, but Moab itself was forgotten. But here is where the story breaks open into something unexpected. In the middle of this generational judgment, this 10-generation ban, this divine verdict, this slow erasure, there is a woman. Her name is Ruth, a Moabite woman, by law excluded, by blood disqualified, by origin carrying every wound of her people's history.
We can't delay any
And yet
longer.
Ruth chapter
I know,
1 verse
but I'm
16
afraid.
records
We
her
have to be
famous
strong
declaration to
together.
Naomi,
We
"Your
can't delay
people
any
shall be my
longer.
people,
I know,
and your
but I'm
God,
afraid.
my
We
God."
have to-
She chose differently, and God responded to the choice, not the bloodline. Ruth
time has
married
come. We
Boaz.
cannot delay.
She entered the
but are
covenant.
we ready for what
She bore a
follows?
son
We
named
must be.
Obed, who fathered Jesse, who fathered David, the greatest king in Israel's history, the man after God's own heart, the ancestor in whose line the Messiah would eventually come. A Moabite woman is in the lineage of Jesus Christ. The opportunity was always there. Moab as a nation refused it. Ruth took it alone. The door was never locked from God's side. 3 truths remain standing when the dust of this story settles. The first, origin does not determine destiny, but it shapes the battle. Moab began in fracture and never dealt honestly with what they were. They built a civilization on an unexamined wound. Nations and people that refuse to confront their origin repeat it at larger and larger scales. The second, the most dangerous weapon is not force, it is slow corruption. Moab could not defeat Israel in open war, so they introduced their worship, their culture, their gods. The strategy worked. What could not be conquered militarily was nearly destroyed spiritually. This pattern has never changed. The third, judgment is not the absence of mercy, it is the end of patience. God spoke to Moab through history, through prophets, through proximity to his people. Every encounter with Israel was an invitation. Moab heard the words. They watched the miracles from a distance, and they chose Chemosh anyway. Ruth proved that the verdict on a nation is never the verdict on every soul within it. The choice remains. It always has.